You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Sunday, September 17th. The 49ers just finished beating the Rams 30-23 in very dramatic fashion. Joining me to break it all down is Sourdeath Sam. How's it going today, man?
It's going well. Happy to leave with a W. From when we talked on Wednesday, I think it was a lot closer than we thought. I think it sort of split the difference from what we thought it was going to be, which was potentially a trap game, potentially a runaway victory. So excited to talk about it.
For sure. I feel like if someone looked at the final score and maybe didn't watch the game, they'd be like, all right, like that's about what I expected to happen. But if they saw the game, they would have probably been like, ooh, this 49ers team doesn't look so great. At least if they saw any part of the first half, because that is what I guess was concerning to me. We'll talk about it. But yeah, this was a weird game. And I do want to start by saying that a lot of people gaslit me into thinking the Rams were not actually good. They were just playing the Seahawks in week 1 and the Seahawks suck. And I knew it. I had a feeling. This Rams offense looked better than expected. Nakua is legit. I think we saw that today as well. But I digress. So let's talk about the first half, because this game was truly a game of two halves for the 49ers, in particular for their defense. So as far as what went wrong in the first half, like this defense just looked like a shell of themselves. They were lacking pressure. They didn't get any sacks in the first half. I believe they only had one QB hit. Stafford had plenty of time. They were running lots of man coverage, which was giving the Rams receivers a bunch of cushion. And so Stafford was finding his guys all day. It didn't help that like Ambry Thomas was out there. He seemed to be struggling too, but I'm going to be pointing the finger at the off-man coverage for the first half and why, the Rams offense got to such a hot start.
Yeah, I think what became clear in this game was that our enthusiasm about our defensive performance from week 1, we sobered up a little bit, and we began to understand sort of where we were vulnerable against a Rams team that, for any team that has the Rams on their schedule, don't play around. We saw in week 1 that was the case. We weren't sure if it was Seattle being bad and the Rams being good, some combination of both. The Rams without Cooper Kupp are capable of generating an offense. And so beware. And I think our defense, I don't necessarily think that we took the Rams for granted, but I think that it was imperative that we made as many adjustments as we could by halftime or right after halftime to ensure that we didn't let this get out of hand and, God forbid, turn into a trap game.
Yeah, I was just shocked by the lack of energy that the defense showed in the first half. It was just weird because they just looked so dominant in week 1. You're going into LA, which historically has been, you've had many great games there. Tons of 49er fans in the house. So I was a little confused as to what was going on in that first half. And again, like we mentioned, Nakua, he ended the game with 19 targets. He had 15 last week. So crazy game again from Nakua. If you guys picked him up in fantasy, you're probably feeling really good right now. But I think what we saw early was, again, the corners kind of struggling. Ambry Thomas was getting picked on quite a bit. And once again, second game in a row that we see the corner shuffle a bit late in the game, or like I think by halftime, I believe Ambry Thomas left the game with a knee injury is what they said. And Isaiah Oliver then played the nickel, and you had Lenore back in the slot. There was even one point in the game when Lenore exited because he was getting looked at for a concussion. He was cleared. He came back in, thankfully, because he made a few nice plays there in the second half. But yeah, I mean, in the second half, they had a lot to work on. And I think we were all kind of wondering, will Steve Wilks make the adjustments, because that's been the thing that D'Amico Ryans did so well, Robert Saleh even. So could Steve Wilkes make the adjustments necessary to put the defense back on track? And I think we could safely say that did happen. They were forced into mistakes in the second half. 2 interceptions, one by Oliver and another by Lenore. That one by Lenore happened, late in the fourth. He jumped a route. It was on third down. And that pretty much, to me, sealed the game for the 49ers, because, the Rams were trying to get some points there. But some of the other mistakes that it forced the Rams into in the second half, there was that sack from Fred Warner. I believe that was the only sack in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. There was also an intentional grounding penalty, incompletions. There were several of those in the second half. So I think bringing more guys under pressure. He was bringing 5 guys instead of trying to rush 4. And I think it worked out in this game. Maybe wouldn't have worked so well against the Steelers last week, but he brought that in the second half, and I think it definitely worked out for them.
Yeah, I mean, tale of two halves. I mean, by the second half, I think they had made, Steve Wilkes, credit to him. I think he was able to identify what the issues were, whether they be personnel or otherwise. And we were able to walk away at the end of the game with, 2 interceptions and enough clutch plays to walk away with the victory. But, it does allow us to take a step back and really audit the defense and ask ourselves, are we as strong as we thought we were in the beginning? And if not, are there any holes that are so concerning that we may need to address them before the trade deadline?
Yeah, I agree. And I think we were all very pleasantly surprised that there was a redemption arc for Isaiah Oliver, who, as I mentioned, came into the game, mid-game after Ambry Thomas went out with his knee injury. And I think he started off kind of shaky. He had a missed tackle, and everyone's like, "Oh, Oliver, he sucks right now," all this stuff. But he ended the game very strong. He had one of the interceptions, as I mentioned, and he had a couple of big tackles in the second half, including one, late in the fourth that pretty much sealed one of the drives there towards the end. He finished with 8 tackles, including one for loss, a pass defended as well. And all in all, Stafford was dialing it up early in the game. He finished 34 of 55, 307 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions, 67.8 quarterback rating, 55 throws. That's crazy that he threw this much in this game, but it became necessary in the second half when the 49ers just started to really pull away in this one, which is a nice pivot to the offense. And I do want to say it was a weird game from the offense, kind of, because they weren't as sharp as I'm used to them being in games against the Rams. Debo had a pretty good game. He had 63 yards receiving. He led the team. He also had 38 yards rushing. And one of the drives where he had that touchdown, I think really flipped the game, and all the momentum from that point on really was the 49ers, right? But I feel like Brock Purdy, this wasn't his sharpest game. I think his best drive was the drive before halftime when they tied it up. That was a really good drive from Purdy. But outside of that, he had 3 overthrows in this one, 2 in the third quarter alone, when, again, that was critical moment because they were trying to extend that lead a little bit and put this team away. The 2 of the overthrows would have gone for touchdowns, one of them to Ayuk early in the game and the other to Debo. So something to work on. I wouldn't be surprised if Purdy stays on the field later. I don't know. I just know he's going to be working on those throws all week if it's the last thing that he does. But I was just a little surprised that he couldn't hit, those, because those would have been really nice to have.
Yeah, and it's PTSD moments for a 49ers fan again and again and again. I mean, the overthrows hurt because they were dialed up in a way that they should have been touchdowns. We should have had potentially a runaway game. And, whether that was lingering in his mind and sort of throwing him off a little bit, hard to say. I mean, we didn't walk away with him throwing any picks. As far as, keeping things within 10 to 15 yards, he was still performing pretty well. But ultimately, the overthrows hurt because when we see where the ball was supposed to go, when the camera pans over to the receiver, there's no one in front of that receiver. So if that ball reaches within those fingertips, that's a house call 3 times out of 3. And so what we're looking at here is hopefully a learning lesson for Brock Purdy. I think whenever people kind of muse about, I'll just say, our former starting quarterbacks versus Brock Purdy, I think the difference is that you've got a young man who's driven, who's very young, who's eager to sort of make sure that he's dialing in these corrections, as opposed to sort of just waving it off as a mistake that will never happen again. So like you said, I very much believe that he will be laser focused on ensuring that those deep balls become something we celebrate for the future games ahead.
But isn't this super ironic? And Technic Chic points it out. A lot of people said Purdy lacked the arm strength, and funny enough, he overthrew these guys. And a lot of them were kind of down the field. The one to Debo at least was down the field, up the middle. So yeah, I mean, it's not really a matter of arm strength, I guess, for Purdy. It's more so, I don't know, maybe the technique he's throwing with his motion, or like putting his, I don't know.
Maybe just got too excited.
I'm not a quarterback.
Right.
I'm not a quarterback expert. All
Maybe
right,
just got too excited.
Yeah, he needs to get some touch on it, But again, those are things he can work on. Arm strength is not one of those things you can like improve over time. Maybe you can work on your mechanics to make it somewhat improve, but like that's not the issue with Purdy. He could have hit those throws. So I think that's the one positive from this, and I think what we know about Brock Purdy, like we said, that's going to be something he's going to work on. So
yeah, and there are things that I appreciate about Brock Purdy's game that don't even involve completion. Sometimes sometimes I appreciate when he is quick to throw the ball away, when he is able to diagnose what he's looking at, and just say, this isn't going to work. This is either going to put the ball in a dangerous situation, or it's going to burn clock that we need. And so I respect that about his game. When we had spoken on Wednesday, I think we had sort of discussed that there's sort of like an intrinsic trust that we have with Brock Purdy's decision making. And I think that the bummer with the deep balls is that it was the right decision, right, wasn't the right execution. So I'm obviously still high on Brock Purdy. Obviously, you're not going to chalk up every game this season as a perfect polished victory for the Brock Purdy community. But at the same time, the 3 deep balls are just so glaring, because we knew that if they had made that connection, it would have been a touchdown easily.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not down on Purdy at all. I think overall it was still a good game, and he still got the ball to his guys when he needed to, and we saw good things could happen when that happens, right? So Kyle Shanahan is doing his post-game presser right now, giving some injury updates. Brandon Ayuk seemed to have something going on with his shoulder. It seemed to affect him early in the game. There was one point where he made a catch and he was really holding on to that like collarbone shoulder area, and he stayed on the ground for quite a bit. Also wasn't in, like, he was in and out of the game. Kyle said he doesn't think that Ayuk's shoulder issue is serious, so that is good news. Maybe just a stinger, maybe just something that they're going to manage throughout the week, but I'm sure we'll get more details as the week progresses. Remember, the 49ers have a game on Thursday against the Giants for their week 3 matchup, so keeping injuries at a minimum in this game was a big deal. Ambry Thomas came back from his knee issue, so I guess he's okay as well. So it seems like there's not a lot of injury updates once again for the 49ers. I mean, that's a win in itself that, through 2 games, they're coming out of them pretty healthy.
Yeah, and it's a big win that on a short week, we're not going to MetLife to play on that turf. We get the luxury of sort of going to Levi's, and the flight from LA to the Bay is obviously not insurmountable. So a short week is never fun. I mean, players are never thrilled to go from a Sunday to a Thursday game, but all things considered, we're walking away with a pretty favorable situation that will hopefully allow us to get through that Thursday game with a victory, and then afford us a little bit more recovery time going into the following week.
Now, given the fact that we saw the defense start slow and like low energy to start this game, does it give you any pause, like knowing that now they're going to have a very short break going into their next game and they're going to have to try to pick up the energy once again? You hope that, they didn't run out of gas in this one towards the end, because it was such a dramatic game that they pretty much had to play from start to finish. Yeah, like is that concerning you at all for Thursday night?
I honestly feel, and I might regret saying this, but I almost felt more concerned about this Rams game than I felt about the Giants game. I think Matthew Stafford is still an exceptional quarterback. I mean,
Yeah.
you see 2 interceptions in the box score, but they clearly put up 55 passes because they felt that that's where they could attack our defense. If there's anyone who's paying attention to how the 49ers could be vulnerable, it's going to be Sean McVay, and it's going to be the in-division Los Angeles Rams. When it comes to the New York Giants, obviously they're still concerned because those problems haven't necessarily gone away. There is a little bit of pause, certainly, because, surprise, we've discovered our vulnerabilities and we've got to figure out how to shore them up. But going into Thursday, it's hard for me to believe that the Giants' attack is going to be as formidable as what we saw today. I mean, give credit to Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell. These are players who clearly are outperforming where most people thought they would be. Our defense is, whether or not our secondary is a little weaker or not, I mean, our defense is pretty stout. And yet they were able to, Puka Nacua, 147 yards. That's a big deal. When we talk about the Giants, I don't believe we will see the same type of damage, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that that's not where they will attack either. So there is a little bit of pause, but I'm less concerned going into the Giants game than I was going into this Rams game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, divisional matchups are always tougher. They both know each other very well, so I think we saw that in today's game. And yeah, the Giants had a pretty tough matchup today with Arizona Cardinals, and we all know the Arizona Cardinals are not very good. They dropped to 0-2 today. The Giants ended up coming away with the win, which is crazy because they were down 20-0 at one point in this game, and they came back. So I'm also kind of hoping that the dramatic finish for them kind of, tired them out, and maybe we just get another crappy Thursday night game where both teams.
Oh, we will. Oh, we will. There's no escape. There's no, like death and a really boring Thursday night football game are the two things you can guarantee in life. And especially, Saquon may have been banged up in that last game. I know he was taken out of the game before it even ended. So that's something to consider as well. So while we have our own vulnerabilities on our defense, I think our defense is going to I think we're going to have a mutually assured boring game destruction. But I do think that the 49ers will end up being able to overpower even with the weaknesses that we have on hand.
Yeah, I think so too. Shanahan, again, he's doing his post-game presser. On Brock Purdy, he was asked about the 3 overthrows. He said they were all tough ones. The main thing he did today was protect the ball. So kind of the same thing you said. I mean, that is key, especially in a game where Stafford ended up throwing 2 interceptions, and that kind of aided the 49ers taking over this game pretty much. Taking care of the football is a big deal. Technic Chic had this great comment. I like what I have seen from the 49ers in the first 2 games. They have had some struggles, still pushed through. I mean, I think through 2 games, that's true. Like, this team is going to be resilient, and it's because I think they know that they're really good and there's no excuses in their minds. I'd imagine they feel there's no excuses for them to be down against anybody, because I think they believe in themselves and they feel they should be able to beat anybody. So they've been here before, right? They they've come so close so many times. I think they're tired of getting so close. I think they know they're in control of their destiny. And like it was crazy to me because like again in the first half to me they looked tired. But in the second half, it's almost like as the game went on, they had more energy with each snap. It was
Totally.
crazy. So
Totally.
so again, like it all comes from them just believing in themselves and applying themselves to do it. And I think that's what we saw in the second half. So two very different games, through 2 weeks. But I think what we've learned from this team is that they're going to be resilient.
Absolutely. And truthfully, I think one of the questions that I had at the beginning of the season that I felt got erased during the Steelers game that is now rearing its ugly head again is our offense going to have to carry our defense to a certain point?
Yeah.
That's not to say that our defense is going to be incompetent. I don't believe that at all. We've got perennial all-stars on our defense, but if offensive coordinators are capable of knowing where we are vulnerable and us knowing that they know that are still incapable of stopping them, at what point would we need to bring someone in to shore up some of those issues? I don't think we're at that stage yet where we need to pull the trigger on finding an expensive solution. I do think that we are beginning to see where the character of our team, both as far as our resilience and both as far as the makeup of where our strengths and weaknesses are. So it's sort of just something to monitor as we go ahead. And obviously, as we play teams that have a really powerful offense, Dallas, I'm very worried about their passing attack against our defense. I'm sure they are very well aware that that is where they can strike us. So monitoring those games and seeing how we perform, I think is going to really identify within ourselves where the what areas we may need to clean up if we really want to make a deep playoff run where we feel pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, I think so too. I know a lot of people have mentioned that, like, yeah, it seems like this year it's going to be the offense carrying the team. And, I don't know if that's completely true. Like, I think it could be interchangeable based on the game. That's probably something that's going to be flexible based on the game. Like, if your offense isn't holding their weight, I think the defense knows that they're going to have to step up and they're going to step up and vice versa. So I think this was a game where in the first half, we saw the offense, step up in place of the defense. And in the second half, I think it was a little of both, right? But, both of those units responded to a not so great first half. And yeah, I think they're just going to be able to, lift each other up in depending on the game. So I think that's a great development for this team, something we haven't really seen in the past. And I think to me, like it shows growth, on both sides of the ball that they even have the flexibility to do that.
Totally. And honestly, I feel like one of the things that I thought was really nice to see out of this game, and it doesn't surprise me, but I just love to see it, is just the validation of the Christian McCaffrey trade. Again, making its appearance. I mean, 5.8 yards per carry, 116 yards. And then, of course, on the receiving end, still doing great, 6.3 average per reception. He's just such a valuable tool for this system. And it's something that we obviously got a nice sample size of last year, but for it to be a part of our DNA from game one to hopefully all season, it's just something that I don't take for granted anymore, because he's such a valuable resource, in particular to someone like Brock, who if he's losing a little confidence because he misses a deep shot, he knows that he can hit Christian McCaffrey on something short, and that he'll, like many of the other Yak Bros, be able to take that ball and make something special out of it. So, with all the sort of question marks around our defense and with all the question marks around the deep balls, there were some highlights. Debo obviously killing it, like we mentioned, but also Christian McCaffrey putting up some great stats once again in a great performance.
The 49ers trading for Christian McCaffrey last season is the reason that I believe in a higher power. Like that, that was like, it had you told me in 2 years ago that McCaffrey would have been a 49er in 2023, 2022, I wouldn't have believed you, because I'd have been like, that's just too good to be true. And he's here and it's marvelous. It is everything you would have expected it to be. And yeah, I literally can't believe it. Like, I still pinch myself. It boggles my mind. And he really set the tone early, right? Like, he had that 51-yard run. He had a little stiff arm too at the end, a little jawing at what was that,
Yeah.
Witherspoon?
Yeah, it
Not
was
Witherspoon.
Witherspoon.
Yeah,
It was Witherspoon.
even better.
Yeah,
Even better.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
man, so I think that just set the tone for the offense early, that okay, we're gonna be okay in this first half. And yeah, I mean, he doesn't stop showing you why he's so good. Same thing with Fred Warner.
Yep.
Fred Warner is an absolute beast. His sack was insane. I had that I had that gif of the, the Lion King,
Yep.
where he's like jumping through the fire. That's what Fred Warner looks like when he's making these sacks and these tackles. He's so good. It boggles my mind as well how good Fred Warner is. And I'm glad that Steve Wilkes really seemed to lean on him in the second half, because he could do it all. He really could. So he's the guy that I think, if the defense is going to step up, it's going to be because of him leading the way. And I like to see Nick Bosa, get a little action in the second half as well. He didn't exactly, get a sack or anything, but he came close a few times, and that in turn led to a lot of Stafford incompletions and just errant throws and things like that. So again, like, as the game went on, these guys were just getting more and more juice. It was kind of really cool to see.
Totally. And in Nick Bosa's case, I think what we're looking at is, this is what it looks like if he doesn't get a full off season, which
Right.
on one
Yeah.
hand, you're like, oh, I wish, he should have a sack by now. Some people might argue. I would say that, considering the fact that he got effectively 0 off season, and he's still able to make as much of an impact as he does on the field, even though it doesn't reflect in his sacks, it's clearly something they have to account for on the offensive line. And I think it's only a matter of time. Truthfully, I feel like he's still ramping up to what he's supposed to be this year. And then we obviously have many more years ahead of him to continue to ramp up to, his DPOY status. So, would love to see him get his first sack this season. Very well could come this Thursday for all we know. But nonetheless, Fred Warner, obviously, in the meantime, is doing exactly what we need him to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if very, very, very soon here we see Nick Bosa do what he does best, which is get to the quarterback.
Yeah, Fred Warner finished with 12 tackles, a sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass defended, and a quarterback hit. Nick Bosa, as we mentioned, he had a quiet game by his standards. He's still really getting up to speed, and I feel like he's probably
3 quarterback hits.
Yeah, he's probably kicking himself that he's not getting that sack. If there's anything we know about Bosa, like, he just wants to sack the quarterback, man. Like, it's not as easy as it looks, like he says. So, it's so true. And I know he knows that the holdout did put him back some time. And I think he is, like, kicking himself about it by no fault of his own, really. The 49ers should have paid up a little bit sooner. But I mean, for someone who is always looking to, like, break the sack record, like, every year, what was it last year? You wanted to get the 20 piece.
Right.
This has put him a couple weeks back on trying to get to what we know he wants to get to. So that's unfortunate for him. But luckily for all of us, and him included, he's going to have several more years to be able to do that with the 49ers.
Totally. And it's not even an indictment. Right. It's just
not at all.
The fact that he's got, 3 QB hits in his second game after not having an off season, he'll be just fine. So once he gets that first sack, I'm sure it'll be so cathartic, not just for him and for John Lynch and for the team, but for all of us watching. So only a matter of time. I'm not worried about him. And, and I don't think that our defensive line is the top of the top concern in my mind at this moment.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, Nick Bosa spoke to the media after the game. And he was asked about his workload today. He said, "Not too concerned about it. I feel good. I need a couple of games to get my body into football shape. Now that I'm through two and had pretty good output, I'm only going to be up from here." Yes. I mean, couldn't have said it better. So, yeah, I mean, even though it wasn't the prettiest game the entire game, the 49ers came away with a win, and that's all we could ask for. They're 2-0. The Seahawks, barely
Barely
escaped the
squeezed it.
Lions today. I was really hoping they'd fall to 0-2, but
Me too.
Seahawks are now 1-1, and the Cardinals are 0-2. The Rams are 1-1, and the 49ers are 2-0. So
It's like the NFC
yes,
West is like the division that just won't die. It's like
I,
you think the Rams are going to be awful, and
yeah.
they damn near could have well been 2-0. You think the Seahawks were down and out after their first game, and then they squeeze one out against the Lions, who just beat the last Super Bowl champs. Whether or not they're talking about a Kelsey-less team or not, the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. And then you've got, obviously the Cardinals. They're kind of more of the stinkers here, but at the same time, they very well could have walked away with a victory.
Yeah.
So a really resilient NFC West, which is frustrating because you always feel like you have to be on pins and needles, making sure you're executing on game day. Because the next thing you know, if you lose 2-3 games in a row, you'll wake up and you're third in the standings, and you're praying to God you get a wild card spot.
Especially against those NFC West games, right? Which
Correct.
we had one today. There's more down the line. So the 49ers can't get comfortable in any of those games, as we've seen. But a win is a win, and I feel pretty good about it. So we're going to enjoy the rest of our Sunday here. I hope you guys too. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Make sure you like this video if you have not yet. And go to Sourdeath Sam's channel as well. The link is in the description for his channel under my video, so make sure you guys check that out. He has a very unique take on 49ers, and I love it. I was on his show last week, and it was a really great time. So, any last words?
No, a win is a win is a win. Obviously a short week. I'm excited. I think I might be going to the home opener. We'll see. But aside from that, just excited that we're 2-0. Got to keep the momentum going. If we can get out of this Giants game on a short week with another victory and relatively healthy, things will just keep getting better. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, and let's go Niners, right?
Absolutely. Go Niners. Going to have more great content for you coming this week leading up to that Thursday game. But for now, have a good rest of your Sunday, folks. Peace.